Dr. Jazz.
But cool, David. Thanks for taking the time. Appreciate it.
Sure, my pleasure.
I would just jump in. I saw on your Bandcamp that I mean, I have you on so many records as a band leader, and you're extremely productive, at least in my ears and eyes. And you have a new one coming out in January now, Ballads and Blues. And uh, what's the story behind it? Behind it, how come you decided for a ballads album? I mean,
well, the thing that the most feedback, the most positive feedback I get is from my ballad playing. I mean, in recordings is from the most airplay. Let's say that's really what I mean by feedback. But I get the most response, it seems, or the most following from ballad playing, and some kind of blues playing, blues interpretation of things. So ballads and blues. It's kind of like McCoy Tyner recorded the record called Nights of Ballads and Blues. And it's kind of that idea, like everything isn't a ballad or a blues on that record. So everything won't technically necessarily be a blues, but bluesish. And then some ballads in 3/4 and that kind of thing.
Well, that's the basics, right? I mean, blues and the ballads, like you said, that's, yeah. Will you write your own music as well, or just play standards? I mean, or
I will. It'll probably be half and half.
It's half and half. Oh, okay, super.
Yeah, I mean, I've already done 4 of the tunes. There are 2 originals so far out of 4. So when we record the next 6 tunes, completing the CD, we record in March.
Oh, wow, fantastic.
So only the EP is out now, the first section of it.
Yeah.
So what the plan is, what we're doing is recording the next EP in March, and then Corey Weeds, this alto player whose label this is on, is joining me for 2 tunes, so that we can after the 2 EPs have their play, then we can reissue the whole thing as a CD and add his things, because digital people aren't interested in taking the same thing unless there's something new.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I agree. Well, it's a good thing. I mean, for you,
yeah,
like to get.
So that way it gets another go around.
Definitely, yeah. Where does this productivity come from? Like, especially as a band leader. I mean, I think you're extremely productive. I mean, how do you see that?
I think that all started when after I did my first couple of CDs, like back in the 90s.
Yeah.
I started getting asked to do more by more labels, and I never signed anything. I mean, I never signed a contract. So at one point I was recording, like, there were a few years where I was doing 3 CDs a year, just because when they ask you to do it, you can't say no. I mean, unless you're under a contract or you're in legal trouble. But so my thinking has always been, I mean, when as a young musician, I didn't write that much. I mean, I was always studying how to play and trying to be a better jazz improviser, a better jazz musician, but always was interested in arranging and that kind of thing. So then once these opportunities were there, I thought, this is the great chance for me to get my writing together. So I just started writing, and luckily I had this group of guys. It's a band called One for All.
Yeah,
with
sure.
Rotundi and Eric Alexander and Steve
Beautiful
Davis. Yeah, and so that came at exactly that same time when I was being asked to do things. So now I had a group to write for, and I was writing my own trio things too. But a lot of the stuff that I wrote for One for All, I adapted to my trio playing and so on and so forth. So it seems like the universe wanted me to to do some writing. And so, and plus, you know, you get, I mean, there's a little more money to be made when you write music.
Yeah. What's your process
So,
when writing? I mean, you know, I listened to Blues for Jerry, and it's such a swinging record. And you know,
oh, thanks.
here again, I love the tune, the first one. I think it's the first one, and
Yeah.
some other ones. Like, what's your process when writing? Do you start with a melody or like just chord progressions or?
Well, first of all, just to be clear, that first tune, that Here Again, is not my tune.
Oh,
It's written
really?
by, yeah, it's written by Buddy Montgomery. It's
Oh, shit!
one
I
of my
thought it's yours.
favorite,
Okay, Buddy,
one of my
sure. Okay.
favorite jazz pianists. Yeah, and I grew up with him. I mean, I grew up listening to him. He lived
Okay.
in my hometown in Milwaukee and did a gig 6 nights a week at a hotel for like 15 years. So when I was 15, 16, I was going down there like 2, 3 times a week, just,
Wow.
you know, I was trying to absorb everything he had to offer, and we became good friends and everything. But I learned a lot about writing from studying his compositions. Like I play a lot of his music when I perform, and try to include some, you know, in my recordings. So I think I've recorded maybe 6 or in my recording history, I've done maybe 6 or 7 Buddy tunes. Anyway, he very much was an influence. And when you ask about the process, though, I think most of my writing starts out with something, and that something could either be a melodic motive, you know, some kind of phrase, or it could be what we might call a hook, like a bass line or some kind of vibe. And then always some little germ, and then I try to expand it into a tune. I've got, believe me, I've got on my little digital recorder, I've got about, I would say, a couple hundred unfinished tunes. You know, because I always record the little germs, and then as I get back to it, I keep adding to it, and then some of them just fall by the wayside, and I've never picked them up. So sometimes when I've got a new project due or something, and I'm hung up for ideas, I just go back to this machine and pick something, because there's a lot of things that started, and I don't think that's a bad thing for writers. I mean, it's said that Horace Silver wrote 5 tunes to every one we hear, you know, so he threw a lot of music away, and so I'm kind of throwing them away, but I keep them here so I can just in case I get hung
smart.
up.
Yeah,
right.
It's good to record this stuff. Yeah. I mentioned this Blues for Jerry, and obviously it's for Jerry Tikins. And how did your story with Jerry begin? I mean, he was so important to many of the New York guys you also have been playing with, but
yeah, he was important to me and to One for All, because he did about 5 or 6 records with One for All. He did 5 or 6 with me, but we had a great relationship, and I really liked his hands-off approach. In fact, just about every producer that I've worked for has been hands-off, and that's, to me, that's great, because I like to be I think long and hard about what I want to do and how I want to do it, and I'm very organized about recording. Like, I'm a sideman on a lot of recordings, so I make a lot of recording dates with people, and I'm always kind of like just a little annoyed by the lack of preparation that seems to go into some of these things, you know. And so, like, for example, you do recording yourself, right?
I've done
What
like
do you play? What do you play?
Guitar. I've done like 40 albums already, so yeah, sure.
Okay.
I know the drill.
So, right. So, but my thing is, I like when I'm preparing for, once I have all of my music together and I know what I want to do, then like at least a week or 2 before the session, I'm writing down metronome markings, and then I'm calculating how many courses will make the amount of time that I need. And the amount of time, what I mean by that is I don't want to go over 5 or 6 minutes, because it's not going to get airplay. So that's my thing, and so I calculate like how many courses will we be able to play solos on? Who will do that? And so that when I walk in the studio, I know exactly how each one is going to go. And there's no thinking about it, and I have a metronome marking. So, because a lot of times you know, and when I first started recording, I didn't do that, but I noticed that once things got recorded, I would come home and from the date and listen to it and go, you know, that's a lot faster than I thought, than I wanted it. And you have to realize when you're in the studio, you know, you're in a different head. So it's really good to prepare, and I think, and to have like an exact tempo that you've thought about, and not just in the moment you're going to do that, because you have to live with that forever.
Yeah. No, it's smart. Yeah. You count it off, and sometimes it's like, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
How do you choose the musicians? You know, obviously, like in case of Blues for Jerry, it's Joe and Peter with whom you played for a really long time. But like, how do you decide for a band like the new one, the Ballads, has a different rhythm section? And
well, sometimes, you know, like this Ballads and Blues thing, like I'm entering a new period in my recording, and that is like ever since the COVID, I've been offered to make recordings where I own the record, where I'm not being hired by a label, but I make the recordings, so I own them. Then I license these companies to distribute them. There's one in Hamburg called G2 Records, and I've been doing work with them. And that's the same kind of arrangement I have with Corey Weeds for this new thing. So I'm trying to figure out how to do business in this digital world, because it's not the same as it's not the same. I mean, we can't make any money anymore doing one-offs, you know, like a record says, make a record for us and we'll give you $5,000, but that's it. I mean, unless you have the ability to negotiate points or whatever. But in jazz, it's such a small percentage of the general, you know, population of music and music listeners that it doesn't usually work that way. But this is a way that I can at least reap some of the benefits, you know, of it being played and people listening to it. And it seems like in this way, more people get exposed to me. And I realize like these playlists are a little tricky, because sometimes people don't even know necessarily who the person that's playing is, although if they like it, they'll look.
They'll check, yeah.
But the distributors know who the people are, you know. And so once you start getting some popularity on these platforms, it gets easier and easier to get stuff up there. Yeah. So and then I can make a little money from that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unlike my other recordings, like Blues for Jerry, I don't think I'll make anything more. Well, that's not true. Every year Jerry Tikin's the Jerry Senior. When he would come to do the next recording, he would give you the mechanicals from the last recording that you did.
Okay.
So, you know, that's a nice arrangement, but I think this, you know, shooting for digital platforms is where I own the work is a much more lucrative, or has the possibility of being more of a moneymaker for me.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's like, I mean, it's so many times it's just changed now, even that the labels pay the musicians and the studio, you know. It's just like it's terrible where it's gone. I mean, bizarre world.
And when you think back, I mean, when I think back on it, like, I mean, I was happy just to be making records, and yes, of course I'll do that record. It's great, and happy to get exposure and everything else. But when I think back to like Motown days or the early days of pop music, like, man, they were ripping those guys off because they were making millions and billions of dollars, and I'm sure just paying them horribly, you know. So.
Yeah, it's almost weird there now, almost.
Yeah.
But you mentioned David Milwaukee before, and what got you excited? I mean, I don't know much about Milwaukee jazz scene, I'll put it like that. But what got you excited for jazz when you lived there, and when did that happen? When you were a teenager, or was there a certain moment that you said like, "Shit, I want to do that"? Or
well, it's interesting. It happened in phases. When I was 6 years old, my older brother, just got out of the Air Force. And when he was in the Air Force, he was stationed in Pakistan, and he was a big jazz fan, or got turned on to jazz and started collecting records. So he brought home like a lot of great records. In fact, I still have a few of them, like original pressings of Miles at the Black Hawk, and like classic records. Unfortunately, they're not worth anything because, once I owned them and started studying music, we're playing Drop the Needle all the time, and I scratched up all these things. But I'm sure there are some that would be worth money if they were in better shape. Anyway, so that was when he came back from the service. There were all of those records were there, and he was living with us for a few years. So, but the funny thing is, I was at the time I was 6 years old. I hated it. I couldn't stand listening to that. And then I started studying. I started taking lessons. Just in general, was interested in playing music, not jazz. But at the age of 8, I started playing, and at the age of 11, my mother, out of nowhere, brought home a record called. I was playing the organ, by the way. So she found this record, Jimmy Smith Plays the Standards, and brought it home for me. She said, I thought maybe you'd like this. And that changed everything. I mean, when I heard the organ being played that way, I was like, oh my God, that's, I'm 11 years old. So then we had this struggle to find a teacher that could teach me how to do that. And we found a guy, and that really was my only teacher. I mean, I went to a conservatory and had classical teachers and stuff, but this guy, his name was Will Green, and he was my teacher from the time I was about 12 to 15 or 16. But he got me playing great so fast that I was working professionally by the time I was 13.
Wow.
And
like
playing in jazz clubs by the time I was driving. When I was 16, I was making gigs in jazz clubs. So, I had a push there, and from there it was just like this guy Will Green. He said, he was blind also, and he said, he always told me, whatever you do, don't play music for a living. So he was an electronic guy, and he repaired as a side business. He had a repair business where he repaired televisions, stereos, all this stuff. So I loved him so much. I mean, I tried to emulate him in every possible way. So I was, when I was about to turn 18, finishing high school, I was registered at Milwaukee School of Engineering because I wanted to be an electrical engineer like my teacher. But at the same time, I was practicing a lot and making a lot of gigs with older jazz musicians, and I loved that. That was great. And as I got close to starting school, I was registered. We had paid, and 1 week before, I told my parents, I can't do this. I can't go that direction. I spend too much time, by then I changed to piano. I spent too much time at the piano to do it. And they were very cool about it. I'm sure they were just like, oh my God, that's horrible. But so that's when I made the decision to go to music school, and that kind of changed, the direction of my life.
Well, interesting. When did you move to New York, by the way? I mean, you're there now. Like,
I moved to New York when I was 21.
Already, okay.
But I was married at that time. That was my first wife, and she did not like New York at all. So we were only here for a couple of years, and then we moved back to Milwaukee, and that's where I started teaching a lot, and kind of got those skills together, teaching skills. But I also had lots of time to practice, and there were a lot of things that I wanted to take time and study and practice that I had seen during my time in New York, and been influenced by people, and had lessons with Chris Anderson, and weird, just strange little situations. But I figured I'd make the most of this return to Milwaukee and just practice. And so I practiced like 7, 8, 9 hours a day. Wow. And then the marriage ended up falling apart. So I sold the house. We broke up. I sold the house and immediately hightailed it back to New York in 92.
92, okay.
92. So I've been here now consistently since
30,
90.
Yeah. Well,
So
how was it like for you in New York when you came? I mean, I have you on some Brian Lynch records, which date like early 90s, I think. Like,
yeah.
who were the first people actually that you hooked up with in New York and kind of
The first people were in the early 80s,
80s
when the
before?
first
Yeah.
time I was here. Yeah, and I actually was doing quite well. I had this steady gig at this place called the Star Cafe. It was on 23rd Street, and it was this little jive dive bar. But this drummer, his name is Harold White. He used to play with Horace Silver. He knew all the cats. He knew all the great jazz musicians in town. So he organized this band. He included me, and Brian Lynch was in the band, but also Junior Cook and
Mm.
Curtis were
Oh
in the
wow.
band. Ed
Okay.
Howard played bass, and so this became started. We were there like 4 or 5 nights a week,
Wow.
and cats started to hear about it. It was so funny because it was this little jive dive bar with a pool table in the middle that they had to move to the side. I brought my Fender Rhodes. Fender Rhodes. I lived on the 6th floor of a loft. So once a week I would take my Rhodes to this place, and then at the end of the week bring it back. That was a whole different trip. I can't believe I did that.
Man. Okay.
But anyway, that's where I met a lot of guys. And so when I left, I kept in touch, and would make trips back to New York and play with Brian or play with some other people. But so when I came back after 11 years or 10 years or whatever it was, I had connections. And so I mean, I still was unemployed basically for a year or so. And then I started to get little gigs, and after my first year here, I spent a year working at the Rainbow Room, which is basically a corny swing dance club, and it's at the top of Rockefeller Center.
Oh, wow.
So, and it was 6 nights a week, horrible musicians, horrible, and this is like year 2 back in New York by myself. My wife's got in the picture. I'm living with Brian Lynch, and I'm playing with horrible musicians for 6 hours a night, not being able to interact with any other people because, and at one point I remember going, because we were on the top floor, and on the breaks, there was access to the roof. So I'd stand on the roof of Rockefeller Center. The clouds are right there. But I was looking over the edge going, man, do I really, is this really how I want to live? But I was able to hang on there. And from that gig, I went to, Brian and I started playing the after hours at the Blue Note.
Mm-hmm.
They had an after hours jam session. So we were doing that 5 or 6 nights a week. And then from there, I met Marlena Shaw and started playing with her and started writing for her. And then through that gig, I met Slide Hampton and John
Okay.
Faddis. And then, so I once I was exposed, the problem is there's so many great musicians, but if you don't, in New York, but if nobody hears you, or you don't get hooked up with the right people, it's difficult to get anywhere, because there's so many people. I mean, so many cats. And so I was very fortunate, I think, to have these relationships. And, and then I went on to work with all these guys like James Moody and Slide Hampton. Slide Hampton did the first thing I did with Slide. He had a 3-month European tour playing. He wrote, it was Charlie Parker's 75th birthday. And he wrote all this big band. It was a big band. And he wrote all this big band music. It was unbelievable writing and really a lot of fun to play. And great cats in the band. George Mraz was playing bass. That's where I met him.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about George.
Yeah, so anyway, I had just all of those experiences, and being able to be around Slide and talk to him about writing, and he helped me write some. I had to do some big band charts. I had never written a big band thing before, and he helped me so much and showed me so many things about arranging music. And even when I started writing for One for All, like I had never written for a sextet before, not really. And so, you know, I was kind of in the dark as to how exactly what to do. I mean, I've always listened to Horace Silver. I transcribed things. I knew, you know, I knew what was going on, but it's when you're all of a sudden writing for these guys play great, man. I mean, so, you know, I was just always afraid, like, oh, what if my stuff doesn't sound great? But Slide always told me, just write what you play on the piano, because what you play is perfect. Just write that. Mm. And I did, and it did work out perfectly. It was just a matter of, you know, figuring out when you want harmony, when you want unisons, when you want different things to happen, you know, different textures. Mm. But Slide was so helpful in my writing. I should really, I forget about, he's passed now, but, and we really didn't have much communication for the last 10 or 15 years. And I keep forgetting what a big influence he was on me writing wise, and what he really took me under his wing. That way.
Did he push you also to become a band leader, like that Four Flights Up and those the early records?
Oh yeah, that's right. So that's when I first met him, and we went on the road with that big band.
Yeah,
and he agreed to do that record with me.
How did that happen? That record, actually. I mean, how did you become a band leader? I mean, did you start leading bands in New York at that time already, or?
No. I mean, you know, I was a sideman. I was working with other people, but this guy was starting a label, and he asked me if I wanted to do a thing as a leader. And yeah, of course. That was really my first record. And I had just started working with Slide, so we were trying to think of a good person to be sort of the star on the record with, you know. And so Slide agreed to do it, and that was very kind of him. I mean, he took my music. At that point, I had things that I had written, but not especially for that date or for trombone or for him. But he took the stuff and made it fit the trombone. He had to change some registers and make some adjustments and things. But he was really cool about the whole thing. And that was my first time I led a group as you know, on a record. And really, I haven't done much other than recording as leader. And only in the last 10 years have I been like playing as a leader, you know, like, and mainly because people are getting out of here. I mean, you know, like Marlena Shaw's retired, Slide passed, you know, James Moody passed. A lot of the people that I used to work with are gone. So it's being a sideman isn't, you know, it doesn't have the, well, it doesn't have the financial aspect of it happening anymore, but also just all, you know, I've never thought of myself as a touring leader, and this has been a whole new kind of thing to wrap my head around. In fact, I just got a travel agent yesterday, finally, you know, because I'm always trying to do my own bookings and stuff, and before that was always handled for me by, you know, whoever was hiring me. So yeah, only recently have I started really performing as a leader.
Interesting. Well, you mentioned also One for All before, and how did you hook up with those guys? And I mean, that's been like one of the most powerful. I did these interviews, you know, with Steve Davis and Jim Rotundi, and
oh, good.
And
nice.
You know, it's been such a powerful unit, I think, this band. And like, how did you hook up with those guys? And
those guys were already playing together. Joe Farnsworth and Steve and Jim Rotundi and Eric, they were all playing together, and regularly at a place uptown that's now Smoke, but it was called Auggies at that time.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And so once I think Jim Rotundi hired me for a gig at one point. In fact, I think he hired me for my first gig, really, in New York. And then he turned me on to those guys, and they started asking me to come to Auggies to play. And so, you know, the thing fit so well. The six of us at that time, I think Peter Washington was playing bass with us, and the six of us decided to go into it was Dwayne Burnell. That's who was doing Dwayne Burnell, and we decided to go make a demo. And the band sounded amazing, and everybody was a writer. The band just clicked like instantly. Everybody was a writer and was writing great stuff, and I was able to learn more about that. And as I said before, like it gave me an outlet for my writing, you know, to be able to write for those guys. And so that's kind of how it's just evolved from Auggies, really.
Yeah, it's such a powerful unit. It's nice to see that band, because it's like all of you are incredible band leaders also, you know, like everyone in that band, and it's nice. At the same time,
we have a new record. We have a new record.
Really? When?
Did Steve tell you about it? No.
I did this talk with Steve like last year already. So.
Oh, okay. Well, we recorded it last year. We recorded it in September of last year.
Okay.
And we are just now. It's just coming out in March, I think. So we're doing the CD release as a group. This is the first time we played together since we recorded in March. And I don't recall the name. I don't know if there is a name yet. I don't remember if there is a name yet of it. But it's, you know, there hasn't been there hasn't been a One for All CD in a while.
Yeah,
maybe since the pandemic. Maybe.
Well, beautiful, man. Okay, looking forward. So it's going to be an active spring for you, like with records and everything. So nice. Yeah,
I like to stay busy, man.
Busy, yeah.
I mean, you know, I always thought, you know, when I was really busy before, you know, when I say before, I mean before the epidemic.
Yeah.
I was always busy and thinking, wow, it'd be really nice to have a break. And you know, the first month, I'm sure a lot of people experience this. The first month or so, you're thinking, you know, this isn't so bad. It's an excuse to sit around, catch up, whatever.
Yeah.
I've been married for 10 years to this wonderful woman who gave us a lot of time to be around each other. But man, after that first month or two,
I hear you. Yeah.
Are crawling the walls, and you just want human contact and be able to play with people, and you know, so. That really threw me for a loop. I mean, you know, there was way too much wine consumed, and you know, blah blah blah. So I don't know how you handled it, but it wasn't fun.
Yeah, I mean, I drank a lot of whiskey.
See what I mean? That's what I'm talking about.
I mean, I practiced. I spoke to so many guys that use the time to compose and practice. But then after a couple of months, you know, you wrote a lot of music, you practiced, and then it was like, shit, I want to play now, you know. And
right.
And it just went on like for a year, and still like, damn. It was heavy. It was a heavy period.
Yeah, and then there was the, you know, when it started to lighten up, then it was, you know, so many problems to travel, like. Yeah. So I remember the first tour I did. It was the paperwork to get back into the United States was unbelievable. Like 10, 15 pages of, you know, crazy.
No, that was not. It was not nice. I also did a tour right after the pandemic, and you know, the clubs that had like 80 people could fit in only 20 or 25 now. So it was like, it was officially full, but 25 people, and it was so sad always, like, oh damn.
Right. And also some countries worse than others, but rigid rules about, especially for people from that country. Like I remember not last year, but the year before, I did a tour, and the guys, not me, but because I was American, but the other guys from Europe had to have a test every day.
Wow.
Yeah, every day before we'd play, you know. So
it was ridiculous, a little, yeah.
Crazy times, man. I'm glad that's behind us.
Yeah, let's not go there.
Knock on wood.
Yeah, let's not go there. But David, I wanted to ask you about George Morse. You mentioned him before, and I love the trio with Billy Drummond and with George. And you know, he's been one of the greats of the music. And like, how was your hookup with him and your story with him?
Man, George. Well, like I said, we met in
Yep.
Slide's band,
Yep.
and then when Todd Barkin approached me on behalf of Venus Records, the Japanese label, that they had been interested in having me do Bill Evans, something about Bill Evans, you know. So, and Todd thought it would be a great. I like Billy. I already knew Billy and played with Billy, and only played with George in the context of the Slide Hampton band. But Todd thought George would be a good fit because at one point George was very close to having the gig with Bill Evans. So that's the first record we did. It's called Waltz for Debbie, and I remember doing a lot of homework for that record, like in terms of, I mean, Bill's always been one of my favorite, you know, great pianist, and the harmony is just incredible. So it was a fun project to do, but what I enjoyed most about it was getting a relationship with George and his sound. I mean, it's just unbelievable, man. It's got a great sound and such, you know, and it's so swinging, but it's like the great, you know, Buster Williams has that kind of sound, like Sam Jones, you know, Ron Carter, like real top-notch pro sound. There's no question about what each note is, and it's you know, it's unbelievable. So we went on to make, I think, 5 or 6 different records for Venus, and George did a few trio tours with me. I convinced him to go to Japan with me, and the whole time
you did tour. Okay. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, the whole time we were in Japan, George kept saying, "This isn't like when I was here with Hank Jones." You know, we were a little on the cheap. I mean, I was the leader, so I wasn't a big name. You know, the guy just wanted to bring me in because he liked the music, and we did okay in the clubs. It's just we didn't have, like, you know, the red carpet treatment.
Sure.
We're taking a lot of trains, and, you know, blah blah blah. But anyway, George and I got along musically, and he brought me to Prague, where we played some kind of celebration for the president there, who he was tight with. So we had a lot of great experiences, got along, and liked the same things, and, you know, I think we both like vodka as well.
He was from Eastern Europe, so yeah, that was on the schedule a lot, probably. So I believe. Like, but you mentioned Ron Carter before, and also you played with him, right? And that session with Al Foster, and what was your experience with those two guys? I mean, like, that's like a dream rhythm section. That's, you know, that's like it
was wonderful. It wasn't my idea. You know, that was the owner of the label, Smoke, the owner of Smoke. But it was a great idea, and I liked it. And I mean, it was a little intimidating playing with someone like Ron. I mean, being in the studio with someone like Ron Carter trio, and it's my music. So I mean, I had to send it to him in advance, and you know, had sent him recordings of it, of me playing my stuff on the piano.
Oh, wow, okay.
And we never had a rehearsal. We just went to the studio and did the stuff. And it really was like, you know, an average. It was like a 5-6 hour date, something like that. And those guys were wonderful to work with. Ron is a real professional, and Al also. But it's just interesting when you do a record like that. It's impossible to make any more of it. Like, in other words, I can't take those guys on the road. You know, they're not going to go on the road in a trio with me. So, even if they would, if the expense is just way too much.
Impossible.
You know, so that's the only thing I don't like about it is that I was never able to. I think we made one appearance at Smoke for a weekend, but unfortunately Ron was busy, and so that weekend was me and Al and John Patitucci.
Wow. Okay, that's a nice substitution.
Which was another great bass player that I've had the opportunity to work with.
Wow, I didn't know that. Yeah. Wow, beautiful. Yeah. Yeah, you worked with so many great guys. You know, I wanted to ask you before already when we were talking about the 90s, and you connecting with the elders. How did you hook up with Louis Hayes, you know, who's still swinging like crazy, and your story with him, I mean.
That's right. When we're about to make another record in a couple of weeks. We're going to make another record.
Oh man.
Yeah. Louis is 86 now.
I know, it's crazy. I heard the last one and it's just like, really? It's incredible.
Yeah. And you know, I did a record with or did a gig with him in the 80s. This was one of my times when I came back to visit Brian Lynch, and he set up a gig. And I was, you know, Louis has been one of my favorite drummers since I was a kid. I mean, since I was like really into the jazz when I was a teenager. I went out and bought a set of drums so that I could try to learn to play the drums just like Louis Hayes. And so there was this gig, and Brian said, "How would you like it if I got Louis Hayes to play?" And I was like, "Oh my God, that would be a dream." And I'll never forget it. It was frightening, but so wonderful at the same time. And Lou and I hit it off. And when I moved back a few years later, we somehow got connected and did another record with Brian. And then the producer of that record said, "Well, why don't you make a trio record with Lou?" And so I did. It was called the Classic Trio, and it's with me and Peter Washington and Louis. Okay. We did a couple of those. Well, I did 3 or 4 actually. One is with Eric Alexander. But anyway, so that's how that relationship started. And then, you know, I've been on a lot of his records and have worked in different groups of his, and then he's been on mine, and so on, you know, like that ever since. Yeah. And I've been with this group now for the last 2 or 3 years.
Beautiful.
He just got the, you know, last year he got the NEA Jazz Masters Award.
Yeah,
so that has brought his whole working situation up, which he and John Faddis are the only 2 guys that I work for these days. I mean, just because everyone else is either retired or got out of here, you know. But
amazing. Yeah, but it's amazing that he's still doing it. I'm you know, it's just like incredible.
Yeah. And he's very you know, his manager is always trying to get him to take a wheelchair at the airport and do this and do that. I'm always trying to grab his cymbal rolling thing for him, and he's, "I got this, I got it." You know, he really wants to be a young guy still, you know.
Beautiful.
And it keeps him, I mean, he's mentally cute. Everything is happening, you know. He's in good physical shape and everything. So
cool. Fantastic, man.
Hope for the best.
Yeah. You mentioned John and Louis. Like, I just wanted to ask you also this: like, if you compare being a sideman or a band leader, how would you weigh these 2 things? Like, is it a pressure for you to be a band leader or not really? I mean, like, obviously you've done so much work now, but
it's a pressure, you know. I mean, I like both. I like being a sideman and a leader, and for different reasons, you know. It's nice to be in control. It's nice to be able to play exactly what you want to play. Although it's also nice not to have that burden of making those decisions and just being a musician, you know, as opposed to like a diplomat or a thinker of how is this going to be perceived? What should we play next? Blah, blah, blah. You know, when I work with somebody else, it's just like, "Oh, I'm just here to play the piano, man. I don't have to make any of them." So I like doing both things.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. Band leading can be, oh man.
You sound like a man who knows.
Yeah, man, it's a beast. But I love it. It's nice. It's a privilege. I'll put it like that. Definitely.
Yeah.
But just one last thing, like, what's on for you on the schedule? I mean, you mentioned a tour in March, and you know, One for All new record and the Ballad new record. Do you have some other tours or sideman projects coming up, like in the upcoming weeks and months? And
Not really. Just this record coming up with that we're going to do with Lewis
Mhm.
and the Corey Weeds thing, and then I'm going to continue to make EPs for G2. So those are scheduled for I think one is going to come out in the late summer, and another one's going to come out in fall.
Mm.
And those will be mostly G2 wants me to do mostly ballads. They for some reason those are what they can get placed easily.
Yeah.
So hey,
Oh.
I'm just trying to write some pretty ballads, man, and
Ballads are
choose
nice.
wisely. Choose wisely the standards that I want to play.
Yeah, you should redo Alice in Wonderland again or something like that.
Oh yeah.
Oh man, that's one of my favorite tunes ever. I don't know.
Oh,
It's so simple, but it's so beautiful. I love your version that you did with George and Billy. It's so nice, man.
oh,
Like,
thank you.
such a
Oh,
nice, fulfilling tune. Do you have otherwise with One for All a plan to coming to Europe also on a tour or
We have no plan for that.
no plans, right? Yeah.
No, we haven't done that in a long time.
Yeah, I know. That's why I thought it would be so cool
I
to
think
see
our
you
last
also.
time we were in, we played at the North Sea Festival, and we did some other things. It was the summer. We were in Europe for, I don't know, 2 weeks. We almost killed each other. You can imagine 6 personalities flying around. I mean, it's, we all like to have fun too. I have to say, so that's one thing about that group. We all love each other. There's no question about the affection that we all have for every one of us. Each one of us have a relationship with each other guy, and then collectively the relationship. So, you can imagine, how things can get.
Family,
Things
yeah.
can get very heated, things get very, yes, or like, what's the matter with you,
Being on the road for 2 weeks, that can be rough,
Yeah.
with anyone.
Yeah.
So, but yeah.
Yeah.
But cool.
Yeah.
David, I will not take more of your time. So you'll spend a nice what is it today? Saturday afternoon. So
Saturday, yeah.
yeah.
But thank you. Thank you.
Thank you
It
too.
was fun talking to you.
To you too, and thanks for sharing some of these thoughts and